Welcome, everyone. My name is Dennis Santella. I'm one of the directors at the gallery here at Affirmation Arts. Welcome, Michael and Donna. Thank you for coming tonight. I'll give you a little background of the gallery. You know, we're not exactly a gallery, though I guess we call ourselves that sometimes. We're more of kind of a photo collection, nonprofit. We're not a nonprofit, a no-profit. We make no profit, no money at all. Exhibition space, event space. You know, we host a lot of nonprofit events. We have a focus kind of on photography and a photo collection, but we don't really sell work. So we've done lots of different kinds of shows over the years, but mainly with a concentration in photography. And yeah, that's sort of an overview of what we do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for, first of all, installing the show, and thank you, Donna, for the work.
Thank you both for having me here and allowing me to talk about it. So that's great.
Yeah, so I'm Michael Chovan-Dalton from the Real Photo Show podcast, and I'll be moderating this conversation, also recording it as well. Why don't we start with a little bit of background, Donna, about how you just, so Donna Stirling was on the show 3-4 years ago, yeah, something like that. So why don't you give us sort of a briefer background of how you end up here and getting into photography?
How back do you want me to go?
So,
like how I started photography in general?
So I know, why don't we start there?
Okay.
Yep.
I think photography in some way has always been a part of my life. My grandfather used to take photos, and my dad used to take a lot of photos. They used to have like a dark room and stuff like that. So it's always been kind of in my DNA, I think. But it's something that I never knew about, only when I actually started doing photography myself. I got into photography about in high school, and then I stopped a little bit. And then when I was doing my mandatory service, I kind of felt very lost and very uninspired. And that's when I met Yoav, my husband. And we actually started taking photos, and he actually started teaching me a lot of the basics in photography. And that really helped me understand it more. So I really got more technical with it, and I actually started to take photography more seriously. So when I left the Army, I immediately went into school. I did my undergrad, and that's really where I started, I think, finding my voice and kind of my passion for it. And I learned black and white and kind of the traditional background for photography, and that was a really pivotal moment for me, because I really really fell in love with what photography can be.
I mean, you and Yoav meet in Israel, and
yes,
you both emigrate here, but at different times, right?
Yes, he came 1 year before me, and then I joined after I finished my BA. And I had a year of kind of me being almost by myself here in New York City, because he was working and I wasn't able to work. I still wasn't in school, so it was kind of like a limbo year for me. But then eventually I was accepted to the School of Visual Arts, and that's where I did my MFA. And I met Adam there. So that was great. And then I was able to really take my photography to the next level, I think, and really understand what I was interested in, get a little deeper and figure out who I was as a person.
So the reason why I asked you for that background is it has a lot to do with this book, right? The being a child of immigrants in Israel, and also then this sort of conflicting cultures that you had have this trouble sort of identifying as in one way or another. But before we get to that, you are also a founder of Float Photo. Do you just want to sort of mention that a little bit?
Yeah, so back in 2014, we decided to apply for our artist visa. And to apply for an artist visa, you really have to showcase your ability as an artist and kind of prove yourself, right? So we were
That you're going to be a
working-
contributing member of society.
Exactly, yes. But you have to also show that you're more than just someone who does photography, right? Like you're an established artist, you've done things. So we were kind of really hustling to get all that set up and ready and applying to things. And in the process, you know, of getting rejected over and over and over again, because statistically, when you apply to 100 places, you're going to get rejected to a good chunk of them. It just started feeling very daunting, the feeling of gatekeepers. And we just decided to go for it and build something of our own that could be maybe potentially different. And the goal was to really create a community of photographers who can share work together, celebrate it, and try and be as open and accepting as possible. So that's kind of where it started. And it's been already 10 years, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
So I'm going to share, for those online, the slideshow. And for those of you who are online, if something goes wrong, just feel free to unmute and let me know. Because it gets a little weird when I go full screen on the slideshow. So we're sharing the pictures on the show. You all here in the gallery can see them. Let's talk about the book. So the book is Why Am I Sad, published by Keher Verlag. And like I mentioned earlier, the work, the idea of the work is this sort of conflicting idea of who you are, and also a bit of, I don't know if it's clinical depression, but the idea of depression, right?
Right. So I'll go back, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, so my parents both are originally from London, and they moved to Israel back in '88. A big part of the reason they moved was anti-Semitism and just the feeling of they needed a place to feel safe, right? They just didn't want to think about the fact that they were Jewish. They just wanted to live their life, right? So they moved to Israel, and I was born in '89. So I was the first kind of member of the family that was Israeli, or I guess in a way was different. I was not like everyone else in the family. So I grew up speaking Hebrew at home. I grew up speaking Hebrew outside with my friends in school, you know, and then I spoke only English in home. And I just had a kind of like a difficult time managing the duality of languages and just the culture. You know, my parents are very different than a lot of the Israeli parents. They had different customs and different food and just different way of talking and acting. And I kind of always felt not embarrassed, but I felt very self-conscious about being different. So I felt like an immigrant in a country where I was born, and I just felt like an outsider. So that was something that always it was something I always struggled with. And then in addition to that, I have a mother who suffers from clinical depression, and now even, you know, years later, dementia, and that has its own, you know, complexities, and eating disorders, right? So growing up with a mother who has all these kind of mental health challenges really does affect you, even if you're not aware of it. So I grew up very resentful, very almost isolated in my own house. I felt very alone in my own house, very disconnected from everyone else in the family. And I just spent a lot of time by myself. And I think that's when depression of my own kind of started creeping in, and being almost like a companion of my life, right? But then I found photography, and that allowed me to kind of explore these notions of just understanding why I was feeling the way I was feeling, even though I couldn't really express them in words. So photography was kind of like a way for me to write. Like I couldn't write, I couldn't express it, I couldn't talk to anyone, so I was just making photos of objects in my room, and it kind of grew from there to a real passion for photography. And that's kind of why I do still life, because when I started, that's all I had around was objects. I couldn't really document my family because I didn't really feel connected to them. So that's why I used still life to kind of communicate.
Well, so along those lines, I'll skip the order a little bit. How do you go about then connecting the work to that idea? Was the work you've just sort of been doing all along, and then later you kind of realize this fits this narrative that you've just been talking about?
Right.
What was how did that all come together?
It actually started, I think, with the photo right behind us, which is great that it's behind us, the purple flowers. We were invited to do Photo Lucida back in 2019, me and Yoav, as Float Photo Magazine. So I kind of like went there as an editor of like this magazine, right? I'm supposed to be knowledgeable and I should have my life together and I should know better, right? So I'm going as someone who has authority to say to someone else if their work is good or bad, in theory, right? But it was actually a time in my life that I felt very, very sad, very depressed. It was very hard. We've been going through immigration stuff and just like a lot of things in general in life. It just felt very heavy that time. And then we went to Photo Lucidia and we did a road trip like we always do. Me and Yoav, we love doing that. And
road trips and gas station food. And
yes, exactly. He's representing one today. So yeah, like we were driving down the coast of like, you know, California. It was the first time we were in the West Coast, and it was just really beautiful and almost something we've never seen before. It was really remarkable. But still, I just felt very, very sad. And I haven't taken photos for a long time before that. I've been struggling. I haven't been making work, and I just felt like I'm not an artist enough because I'm not making work, right? So I just had a lot of doubt and just a lot of anxiety around photography in general. I missed it. I wanted to take photos, but I couldn't take photos because I was so sad. And that kind of created like a weird cycle of not making work because I was sad.
You mentioned in the book that you start to think of photography as a burden at that point, right?
Yes, exactly. So it becomes a burden. It becomes this like thing that hovers around, like above your head, that you're not making enough. And then I stumbled upon these purple flowers and this beautiful scene of like, you know, a red reflector that's just like there for like a very specific reason to show a driveway, right? It's not trying to be beautiful, but it was so poetic. It was exactly what I was looking for from photography. And I took a photo and it really sparked this like new passion in me. And I fell in love with photography again. And, you know, afterwards, me and Yoav were like talking in the car, and I was joking around. I was like, maybe I should just make a work asking why I'm sad all the time. And it was like, yeah, maybe I should, you know, like maybe it's something that's important. And so that's kind of how it started. And this photo really was the pivotal moment that kind of shifted my whole perception.
For those of you online, it's I think purple lupine flowers. The cone flowers, the cone flowers I keep showing.
They call it Pride of Madeira.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but yeah.
Anyone here know? Yeah. This isn't your first foray into that kind of exploration. You also did a series, and I don't remember if it was just all Instagram or not, about rejection.
Yes.
Right? Rejection letters and rejection from applying for things. Right?
Yeah, my rejection book has been my most successful work so far. So that's kind of ironic in a way, but it went like, I don't think the word viral is correct, but it went beyond what I ever expected it to, you know, go. It got very popular. People were very interested in it. And I think people enjoyed the fact that it was very candid about the notion of being rejected and the fact that I kind of flipped the script on people. I took their rejection letter, made art out of it, and then got successful because of it. So yeah, it was a fun project. It's still kind of like one of my best, I think, successes in many ways. But yeah, I think I've always been very interested in just the idea of failing and just not being the best, and just like being open about talking about these things. Because I think a lot of artists struggle and a lot of artists feel the same way, but it's not so common or so, you know, accepted to talk about these things, because you want to kind of show your best facade. You want to be the best artist. You want to be the successful artist. You don't want to be the one who got rejected. So I think it just allowed people to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Failure too. Like, I was thinking a lot about that as we were talking about your work. You know, the failure is a big part of photography. I think even like the best case scenario, like, is there any other medium where you know going into it that like 99% of your work is going to never be seen? But something kind of just fundamentally melancholy about photography.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things about this series of work, you know, there's a kind of emotional cheerfulness to the color in the photography, to the color in the work, right? And the flowers and other things like that. But there's also a very stark sense of, I think, loss and isolation in the work. There's actual death in the work, right? With roadkill and butterfly and the other things. But the other thing that happens in the work is the smiley face. The smiley face pops up every so many photos, and the smiley face feels like it's mocking us when we're looking at the work, right?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I think when I started making the work and I was kind of like finding these smileys, in the beginning they felt very cheerful. They felt very inviting, almost like discovering this friend, right? That was waiting for you with open arms, and like I was able to capture them. It felt very innocent, very kind of like naive and fun. But then I think as the work progressed, and especially now after like I was taking all the photos and I was kind of looking at the book and sequencing and everything, it started feeling less happy. It started feeling more sinister, almost like they were, like you said, like mocking, taunting, kind of like in your face happy, and kind of almost emphasizing the irony of taking photos of smileys when you're like sad inside. But I think that's why the book cover was so important to me, and I think the designer did such a great job capturing it's exactly that, like how simple it is to change a happy face to a sad face, because every happy face is a sad face if you turn it around, right? So the fact that everyone has that little bit of sadness behind, and that it's not perfect all the time, and there's more to life than just like the facade that we show other people when we walk. So the smileys kind of became like little just like creatures that like crept into the work and just like reminded me that I'm not happy. So I think that's why the motif of them was very powerful.
Yeah. Getting back to the process of making the work, you said you actually intentionally thought I would explore why am I sad, but how much of the work was sort of already there? Meaning, was it only working on this idea as you were traveling, going around, or was this born of several projects, different ideas, just photographing while you were out? And then, so what I'm trying to get at is, you started to talk about how it was the idea and you started photographing it. How much of the work in the book is all that, or from other projects sort of edited and put together in a certain way?
I think all of the work came after that photo, but there are some images that came before. For example, the bees came before. I'm trying to think if anything over here. The water slide is from 2015, and one of the most important photos, the toy deer, that is also from.
I remember the toy deer.
Yeah, so that was also a pretty quote unquote old photo, and I took that in a very bad day when I was really, really like. So it wasn't connected to the project, but it felt very important to include it in the project, because it was almost like I was making the work before I knew I was making the work, because this sadness is something that has been following me for years, right? So even though it took me time to really focus on it, I've always been working with this kind of like cloud of sadness over me. So I think it was important for me to bring some of the photos that I felt were very important to the project. Yeah.
The last photo in the book is look up.
Yes.
Right? Is that so hopeful? Is that?
I guess it depends how you look at it.
Mhm.
The book starts with the photo that's behind you. It says summer sunny side up,
Mhm.
and it's kind of supposed to be ironic, kind of like happy, sunny, joyful kind of moment. And then the book ends with a more of a darker, moodier setup. It was like the end of the day was like almost the end of the light. Kind of like like the backyard of a church somewhere, right? So it felt that it had a heaviness to it. It wasn't a joyful
Mhm.
photo. That's why I wanted to kind of start the book with a joyful, positive message, but then end it with a positive message, but had the heaviness of it, because it felt like a way to tie the whole project and just again like kind of highlight the idea of there's always sadness around, even when it's beauty, even when it's happy, there still can be sadness, kind of like a part of it. So I think in a way it's a positive message, but it's also a little ironic and a little kind of cheeky in a way to kind of,
Yeah. When you look at the book, you don't really know where you are
Right.
Until you get to the end, right? So how important was location identification, knowing where you are?
Not at all. I mean, I think we added the captions at the end, because I think it's always interesting for people to know like where it is.
So that was just sort of satisfy someone's curiosity when they got to the end.
I think it's interesting, because also like some of the captions kind of give a little bit of detail that you might have missed, like the photo of the bird, for example. It's only in the caption that you know that it's a dead bird, right? So it kind of gives that extra little nugget, I'll say, of information. But for me, I'm not documenting America, right? My project is not about a country. It's not about identity of a place. It's my identity as a person. So for me, it can be anywhere, any country, any state. It doesn't have it's not relevant.
There are clues.
Yeah, of course, but it's
Yeah.
it's not the project is not about the place. It's about kind of like finding myself in this space.
It's tough for me to I have a sense of where you guys go when you photograph because you share that often. So, but I think there's real kind of Americana in the work as well that would lead to clues about where you are.
Right.
I don't mean like states and cities. I just mean like country and maybe a few states. But the point I was trying to make is that where do you find a balance between that sort of, it's a really sort of personal idea, but now it's out in the public, right? So what is the response or the idea or the reception you're looking for? Was it someone looking at the work?
I think I need to ask people who are looking at the work, right? Because I mean, for me, what I would like people to take away from it is that it's okay not to be okay. Like, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to share it, and you don't have to hide it, right? So, like, in my family, we never talked about the clinical depression. It was always something that kind of lingered. We didn't really speak about it. Nobody really knew about it. It was almost like a shameful thing. Like, don't tell anyone. Like, God forbid someone knew what goes on inside like the house. So I carried that shame with me for many years, and I think the book is almost like allowing me just to go free and be like, okay, I'm sad. It is what it is, right? So I'm not gonna be able to escape it. So now it's more about sharing it and maybe potentially allowing other people to feel comfortable to do the same thing, right? So I think it's just important to talk about mental health and just talk about artists also suffering from mental health and the struggles of like being rejected over and over and trying to put yourself out there and not succeeding, right? So I think all these things are very important, and the more we talk about them, the more people can be there for each other, and the better the community can be, basically. So I think that's really my goal, I think.
Yeah. You know, I want to switch to the whole process now of publishing and crowdsourcing and funding and hanging a show and all that. But before I do, Dennis, did you have any final thoughts or questions on the
No,
work?
I think you did a good job of covering all the things that I was thinking.
Well, thank you. So let's talk about that. This is your first monograph published by a publisher. Yeah. Talk about that whole process of, I mean, so there's, of course, editing where you have to sort of give up some control and and some ideas. There's paying for it or the money involved, the expenses. There's also this idea of crowdsourcing where you don't really know what the response will be and the stress of that, right?
Right. I think so. The first step was kind of reaching out to people. A lot of publishers never responded to me, which is basically rejection. I had a few when I did speak to a few in person, like they just didn't think the work was kind of like sellable, you know, like it wasn't commercial enough maybe. So when I reached out to Keher and they said yes, I was almost like surprised and almost like taken aback. Like I didn't expect to get an email back. So when they did, I was very appreciative. So they've been very supportive and they've always said that they really enjoyed the work, which was very important to me because I wanted to work with someone who believed in the work and saw the value of it, right? So once we started, and of course, the daunting idea of the money, and thank you, Yoav, for allowing me to spend our money on this book. Yeah, it was something that was like one of my biggest, obstacles in a way. But I always wanted to make a book. Books have been such a big part of my work so far. I've made like handmade books and the rejection book, and I just love photography books. It's just a medium that I just believe in, and I think is so important, right? So I wanted to allow myself to be a part of this community of bookmakers, right? So the Kickstarter came, and I'm super grateful for everyone who supported it and just have been so kind and generous, not just with their money, but just like being there for me and like allowing me to vent when I needed to. And I've really made like friends over this Kickstarter who I really am so grateful for because they've been so supportive. And it really showed me that people were interested in the work and were interested in the topic. More importantly, so the process was hard, it was challenging, it took a lot out of me, but I think it was successful, which is great. But I think more importantly, it created almost like a community of people who now have this book and kind of have this passion for talking about mental health and being okay with it and kind of expressing it. So I think that was a huge achievement, I think, from the Kickstarter.
Yeah. How pleasantly surprised were you that it all came through?
I mean, I thought maybe 10 people would pitch into the Kickstarter. So, I mean, I was blown away by the fact that I met the goal and just like, again, just like all the support that I've got, even from people who couldn't maybe support it financially, but they were like there to support me, right? They were sharing, they were posting, they were pushing it to other people. Like, just the idea of the community almost coming to kind of rally behind me, that was huge. And I don't think I could have done it without all these people kind of like standing behind me and pushing me to get to the goal. So I think the response has been amazing so far. So I'm really super grateful for everything.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the giving it up to Keher Verlag, like the editing, the sequencing, the choice of materials.
Yeah, I think it got rocky in some places because, like you said, it's hard to give up control, and you're like, no, I need this book to be exactly the way I want it to be, right? So it was kind of like a back and forth sometimes, but I think once we found like the rhythm and the middle ground where everyone kind of not compromised but like kind of understood each other, I think better. That's when the book really just took its shape, and then I was able to do the book cover with Alicia, who I found on TikTok, funny enough. And he was so generous with his time and creativity, and he really captured the essence of the project in such a simple graphic way.
It's not a photographic cover.
Yeah, and that was something that when me and Yoav spoke about the cover, like when we were talking about, like, I knew I didn't want the cover to be a photo. It was very intentional because I didn't feel like there was one photo that represented the project, because they're very individual in a way, but they tell a bigger story. And I couldn't pick one that was like a standalone that could be the, representer of this thing. So I think the cover just made it more, almost it's like its own piece of art that isn't connected to the images, but still tells the story of the book perfectly.
It's the hardcover material without the cloth.
Yeah, so that was a choice. I guess it came because of the design that he made. Like in the mock-up, he almost suggested that the cover would be a print of a material, right? But then we went a step further and we said, okay, let's actually have the material, the actual material, because printing just didn't feel like the right way. And then we have the smiley kind of silk screened with white and then on yellow on top, and then the black is all debossed in black. So it's very textured and it's very something that you can really feel, and it almost feels like a sticker, which is kind of the point.
Yes, yeah. Stickers are a big part of your practice.
Yes.
And pins.
Yes, merch. Just in general.
That's right. Also, what I noticed looking at so I've had a copy for a while now, and looking at what I realized is actually there's a little textural difference in pattern and little marks and splotches here and there within the cardboard material. It's different for every book.
Because it's not really supposed to be like, you're not really supposed to see it. It's made, I don't know exactly what material it's made of, but it's basically just a book board just uncovered.
Yeah.
And then and then they have this beautiful way of creating the spine that they fold one piece of material and they fold it into the spine. I think it's remarkable. It's just
and then the text comes at the end. Was that your decision? And then the text is the story, is your story behind the book.
Yeah, I mean, my dream for the book was to have an introduction by my favorite photographer, my only favorite photographer, right? Like, if anyone ever asks me who's my go-to photographer, Takashi Yasumura, who is a Japanese photographer, he's my biggest inspiration. I saw his work back in my second year of undergrad, and I want to be him, right? So I think his work is just so remarkable and just so genuine and just so poetic, and he really inspired me. So I wanted the book to have his text, but I was never able to kind of get in touch with him, and I just didn't feel that the work needed anyone else. Like, he was the only person I was allowing to enter this space, but because I wasn't able to get him, I just decided to stay with my own text. I just didn't feel like it needed anything philosophical or anything like that. So I kept it very simple and just had my words in the back of it, just to give a little bit more context maybe to the story. But yeah, I wanted it to be in the back of the book because it's not the main focus. I want people to be able to read the story and to read the images for themselves. And
right, the experience of the book is just looking at the images until you get to the end.
Exactly.
And then there's captions, then there's text, right?
Yeah.
And a lovely thank you to Yoav.
Because I think, I think in a way, it's important that people know about my mother and the clinical depression that runs in my family, and this idea of, the legacy of melancholy that I have, right? That kind of the women of my family kind of have. I think it's important, but I also don't want it to be something that is crucial for you to know in order to read the story of the book. I think you can still feel the sadness and the heaviness of it without knowing that aspect of who I am as a person. I think after you see the images in the book and then read, you can kind of get that extra understanding of who I am as a person and why I do the things that I do. But I don't think it's important for people to see right away. I think it's okay to let them discover it, I think,
Yeah. And now we're here at Affirmation Arts, and we, with the help of Dennis Santella, you've installed a show, which is another experience of the work, right? So thinking about the difference between looking at it on the wall and looking at it on the book, how does that sort of compare, or how do you think about it?
I think that like we were just saying, like when we were looking at the images, it feels different. Like I feel like in the book it feels different than looking at it on the wall. First of all, the sequence of the images here looks different than the book, but just I think the experience of the book, that's why I love photo books so much. Just the way it's framed in the pages is just so different, and it really allows the viewer to kind of like look at something. Where I think in an exhibition, you kind of take everything as a whole more, and you experience the space, right? So like this beautiful New York City view that we have outside the window, right? It almost becomes a part of the work.
Absolutely.
In the space, right?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this when we were hanging, where, you know, it often doesn't make sense to try and like follow a sequence in the book. It's, you know, like you were saying, you kind of take everything in all at once. And you do jump around a lot, and it's a more like physical, spatial experience of the photographs. So yeah, you just kind of have to like put things down on the floor and shuffle them around and see kind of how everything feels together. Because you see the whole wall at once, and then you go looking at individual pictures, and you want there to be kind of a balance on the way the colors play with each other. It's a different experience than going through a book looking at one page at a time.
Right. And in the exhibition, I was able to bring this amazing, I don't know if it's possible to show it, but this amazing vintage machine that is supposed to be kind of like a funny / serious mood reader.
It's like a personality tester.
Yeah, and it kind of it's from the 80s, and it's old fashioned, but it's so remarkably stupid. I don't know how to explain it. It's just a perfect way of like talking about the work, like the irony of it, right? Just like it's okay to also make light and have a little bit of fun with something that is serious.
It kind of embodies some of that. It embodies some of that kind of ironic cheerfulness where, you know, it says underneath the little screen where it reads out the American Productivity Corporation, which like seems so like bland and depressing, but it is trying to be cheerful in such a like weird way.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it just like and the try me and the lights, it's almost like an arcade game that is telling you if you're sad or happy. Like it's kind of weird, right? And the notion of it is strange. So I think that's something that obviously I can't include in the book, so I can bring in as an experience for the show, and I think it's fun for people to kind of engage with it. So I think that's also another aspect of having the show versus the book, and just the experience of it in different ways, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you online, sorry if I was dizzy. But you should see that device, which is wildly accurate, I might say.
Yes, it read Michael perfectly before.
It knows me. Well, I want to say thank you, and thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming, and thank you all online, and thanks for bringing the work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone for coming and just like allowing me to talk about it and share. And Michael, thank you so much. Dennis, thank you so much for inviting me and having me. And it really means so much to me. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.